You were not designed to break. You were designed to bend, adjust, recalibrate, but never to break. The very fact that you are still standing is proof that you were built with more than bones and blood. You were constructed with purpose, and purpose is pressure tested. Storms don't come to destroy you, they come to reveal who you are. So if you're still here after everything that tried to take you out, then it means what tried to break you failed. It didn't fail because it wasn't strong. It failed because you were stronger. You see, people can touch your emotions. Life can touch your plans. But nothing can touch your purpose. Purpose is untouchable. It's not outside of you, it's in you. And what's in you is greater than anything around you. The mistake you made wasn't being hurt. It was believing that hurt could define you. But your scars are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of survival. They say, I've been through it, but it didn't break me. It built me. Because once you understand who you are and whose you are, then you realize something powerful. No one can break you anymore. You were built with purpose, not fragility. That means you were not placed on this earth by accident or formed in weakness or created to be crushed by the weight of life. You were designed with intention. Before anyone knew your name, before your parents planned your arrival or even failed to, God had already stamped your existence with a reason. That's not poetry, that's principle. In Jeremiah 1:5, God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That is divine architecture. Purpose was the blueprint. You are not fragile because you are not random. Fragility comes from uncertainty. It comes when people don't know why they exist, when they live like accidents, walking through time, unsure of their identity and unaware of their assignment. But when you understand that you were formed for something, when you know that your design came from a divine mind, you begin to see yourself differently. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a manufacturer build something with no purpose in mind? Even a paperclip has a reason to exist. And if the manufacturer gave that simple object a specific design to fulfill its role, how much more would the creator of the universe embed intentional design into you? You're not here to simply breathe, work, pay bills, and die. No, your presence is an answer to a problem on the earth. And once you grasp that truth, it becomes very hard for anything or anyone to break you. Think of an aircraft flying through turbulence. The shaking is intense, the winds are violent, but the plane doesn't fall apart in the air. Why? Because the manufacturer already anticipated the storm, the frame, the wings, the structure. It was built not to avoid pressure, but to withstand it. That's you. You are not falling apart. You are flying through resistance. God built you with storms in mind. The problem is, too many people are trying to live life without knowing their original design. And when you don't understand the manufacturer's intention, you'll misuse the product, you'll misuse yourself, you'll allow words, rejection, trauma, or failure to convince you that you are weak. But that's not true. You're not fragile. You've just forgotten what you're made of. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. You are custom built. That means your structure is no accident. Your personality, your background, even your pain, it all fits into the design. And when the design is understood, the product becomes unshakable. You ever see someone try to use a hammer like a screwdriver or use a phone as a paperweight? That's what happens when purpose is unknown. Abuse is inevitable. And some of us have allowed life to abuse us, not because we're weak, but because we didn't know what we were made for. But the moment you align with your original intent, the strength that was always there begins to rise. Purpose gives you focus. It gives you stability. It gives you immunity from the lies of people who try to convince you that you were too broken, too different, too late, or too far gone. But here's the truth. You can't be too late for a purpose that was assigned before time began. And you can't be too broken for a creator who specializes in restoration. What people call broken, God calls raw material. He doesn't throw you away, he rebuilds you stronger, wiser, more aware. So I ask you, what if the things you thought were weaknesses were actually ingredients for your assignment? What if your story with all its turns and tears was part of the molding process? Would you still see yourself as fragile? Or would you begin to understand that every trial you endured was a hammer in the hands of the potter, shaping a vessel that could carry weight others couldn't? You were built with purpose, not fragility. And purpose does not break under pressure, it becomes stronger in it. That's why no one can break you anymore. Storms reveal strength, not weakness. That's a truth many people never discover because they spend their lives trying to avoid storms instead of understanding them. But what if the storm isn't your enemy? What if the storm is your mirror? In life, it's easy to appear strong when everything is calm, when the job is secure, the relationship is steady, the body is healthy, and the plans are working. You can walk with confidence. But that's not where true strength is proven. True strength is not exposed in comfort, it's revealed in crisis. Just like gold is purified by fire, character is revealed by pressure. Let's go to scripture. In Matthew 7:24-27, Jesus speaks about two houses, one built on rock, the other on sand. A storm came to both. That's important. The storm was not selective. It didn't avoid the wise man's house. It didn't punish the foolish man's house. It tested both. The storm didn't create the weakness. It exposed what was already there. So the question isn't, will the storm come? The question is, what will it reveal about you? You might be facing a season right now where everything feels like it's shaking. Maybe the finances are tight. Maybe people you trusted walked away. Maybe your body is tired, your mind is overwhelmed, and your heart feels like it's carrying more than it can handle. That's the storm. And it's loud, and it's painful. But here's the good news. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to reveal you. Have you ever seen how a tree grows stronger after enduring high winds? The roots go deeper, the trunk thickens, the fibers tighten. Why? Because the resistance tells the tree, if you're going to survive here, you must grow stronger. The wind doesn't weaken the tree, it develops it. That's what storms do to people of purpose. They drive your roots deeper. They expand your spiritual capacity. They shake what's temporary so what's eternal can remain. You were not meant to break in storms. You were meant to stand, but not on your own strength. Isaiah 40:29 says, He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. That means when your own strength runs out, divine strength steps in. And that's when you find out what you're really made of. Not when you feel strong, but when you feel empty and still choose to stand. Let me challenge your thinking for a moment. What if the storm that shook your life was actually the tool that God used to anchor your faith? What if the betrayal didn't come to hurt you, but to reposition you? What if the delay wasn't denial, it was training? Would you still view the storm as a setback, or would you see it as preparation? Many people pray for strength but reject the process that builds it. They want endurance but avoid pressure. But strength isn't given, it's developed. And storms are the gym of the Spirit. No one gets stronger by lifting nothing. Think about this. Even Jesus in his humanity faced storms. The storm on the Sea of Galilee didn't intimidate him. In fact, he slept through it while his disciples panicked. Why? Because he knew the storm couldn't override his purpose. That boat was not his burial. It was his classroom. He was teaching them something. You don't need to panic in a storm when you know who's in the boat with you. Can I ask you, do you know who's in your... Because if God is with you, the storm doesn't control your outcome. The waves may rise, the winds may howl, but your foundation remains unshaken, not because of your strength, but because of your source. And when the storm passes, and it will, you won't be the same. You'll be stronger, wiser, deeper. You'll have peace that's no longer based on circumstances, but on confidence. And that's when you realize something powerful. The storm didn't come to break you. It came to prove that you couldn't be broken. Storms don't destroy the prepared, they expose the unprepared. And when you've been built by purpose, reinforced by faith, and anchored in truth, then storms become revelation, not ruin. Because what once made you panic now makes you praise. That's why no one can break you anymore. Your purpose is untouchable. That means no circumstance, no betrayal, no failure, no enemy, no season of loss has the authority to erase what God has already written over your life. People can delay your plans, yes. Life can challenge your confidence, absolutely. But purpose is a sealed assignment. It's eternal, and it is immune to human interference. You were not placed here to merely survive life. You were sent here to complete something. That's why you woke up this morning. That's why, after all you've been through, you're still breathing. Purpose is the reason your story didn't end where others thought it would. The accident couldn't take you. The rejection couldn't crush you. The depression couldn't silence you, because when God assigns a purpose, he also assigns preservation. Romans 11:29 says, "For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable." That means what he placed inside of you is not up for negotiation. It can't be taken back. He doesn't revoke your assignment because of your mistakes, your detours, or even your doubts. You might have walked away from it, but it never walked away from you. Now think about this. Have you ever seen someone trying to plug in a charger into a phone with a broken screen? The phone may look damaged, the glass may be shattered, but if the internal system is intact, the phone still works. It still receives power. That's how your purpose functions. You might be bruised on the outside, you might be carrying scars, but if the system of purpose inside of you is still active, you can still fulfill your assignment. So why do so many people live as if their purpose has an expiration date? Why do we allow disappointment to convince us that we've missed it? That we're too old now, too messed up, too late? And here's the truth. Purpose doesn't operate on your timeline, it operates on God's. Moses didn't step into his purpose until he was 80. David was called long before he was crowned. Joseph had a dream at 17, but lived through betrayal, slavery, and prison before he saw the promise fulfilled. The delay didn't destroy the dream, it developed the man. God never calls you based on where you are. He calls you based on what he placed in you. And what he placed in you cannot be canceled by human opinion. That's why it's dangerous to measure your worth by people's validation. People didn't give you your purpose, so people can't take it away. Let them underestimate you. Let them walk away. Let them say it's over. Your purpose doesn't answer to their opinion. This is where many get lost. They think purpose means ease. But purpose often hides behind resistance. It shows up in the very place you're tempted to give up. That's why spiritual warfare intensifies when you're getting closer. The enemy doesn't attack what doesn't threaten him. The very reason you face unusual pressure is because of the weight of what you carry. Have you noticed how diamonds are formed? Intense pressure deep in the earth, no light, no applause, just time and pressure shaping something that will one day shine. That's purpose. And when it finally emerges, it's not fragile, it's unbreakable, because the process has forged it. Some of you have been in that process, and you've confused it with punishment. But it's preparation. Let me ask you, what would happen if you stopped doubting your worth, based on where you are right now and started trusting the purpose God already placed inside you? What if your current season is not a detour, but a classroom? What if the thing you're trying to escape is actually the thing designed to equip you? You see, when you understand that your purpose is untouchable, you stop chasing approval and start walking in authority. You stop being afraid of closed doors because you know the right ones will open in time. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who don't even understand your assignment. And you start living with clarity, confidence, and conviction. Purpose gives you direction in the middle of confusion. It gives you identity when life tries to label you with failure. It gives you endurance when the path gets long and lonely. Because when you know what you were born for, you stop quitting so easily. You stop comparing. You stop settling. You start building. You start rising. And that's when you realize, beyond the noise, beyond the pain, beyond the delay, that your purpose never left you. It was never lost. It was just waiting for you to see what God already saw. That's why no one can break you anymore. Scars are evidence, not shame, that truth can change how you see your past, your pain, and even your potential. We live in a world that tells you to hide your scars, to cover them up, to pretend the wounds never happened. But in the kingdom of God, scars are not symbols of weakness. They are signs of survival. They are the proof that the wound didn't win. Jesus rose from the dead with scars still in his hands. That's significant. He had the power to heal completely, to erase every mark from the crucifixion, but he didn't. Why? Because the scars told a story. They were evidence of the price he paid, the battle he fought, and the victory he claimed. The scars proved that death had tried and failed. If the resurrected king chose to keep his scars, why are you trying to hide yours? Your scars are not your shame. They are your testimony. Think about it. Every scar has a story. And if you allow it, that story can become someone else's survival guide. The pain you walked through, the heartbreak you endured, the betrayal you overcame, those experiences didn't come to define you, they came to refine you. The enemy hoped you would bleed and break, but you didn't stay in the wound, you healed. And healing leaves a mark. Have you ever noticed how people trust someone more when they've been through something? There's a depth that can't be faked. There's a weight to their words. That's because scars carry authority. Not the kind that comes from titles or degrees, but the kind that comes from battle-tested wisdom. That's what you carry when you refuse to let your past become your prison. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." That's not poetry. That's process. Paul didn't write those words from comfort. He wrote them from experience, from the perspective of a man who had scars and still stood. And like Paul, many of us have been struck by loss, by betrayal, by failure, but we are not destroyed. We have the scars to prove it. Maybe you've been through a divorce. Maybe you've faced addiction. Maybe life didn't turn out the way you planned. And somewhere along the way, you started believing the lie that your story disqualifies you. But what if your story is the very thing God will use to unlock someone else's breakthrough? You see, we admire strength, but we connect through struggle. When you pretend to be perfect, you build walls. But when you show your scars, you build bridges. People don't need your performance, they need your authenticity. They need to know that healing is possible, that survival is possible, that purpose is possible, even after pain. Let me ask you this. What have you been through that you've been too ashamed to talk about? What if that scar isn't your liability, it's your leverage? What if the thing the enemy used to try to silence you is the very thing God wants to use to amplify your voice? Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. And yet, when he stood in power second only to Pharaoh, He didn't deny his past. He looked his brothers in the eye and said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's the power of scars. They remind you that even when others tried to bury you, God was using the dirt to plant you. You're still here, not because life didn't try to break you, not because the pain wasn't real, but because purpose outweighed the pressure. And now, every scar on your soul, every mark on your heart is proof that grace was greater. Don't be ashamed of what you've healed from. Don't hide the evidence. Show it, tell it, let your scars speak, because someone else's freedom might be waiting on your testimony. That's why no one can break you anymore. Identity is your shield against breaking. When you know who you are, you stop allowing life to define you by temporary moments. You stop accepting names that were never yours. Hurt may visit, but it no longer has permission to stay. Because identity, true God-given identity, becomes the unshakable foundation that nothing and no one can destroy. Most people don't break because of what they go through. They break because they forget who they are while going through it. That's where the real danger lies, not in the storm itself, but in the loss of identity during the storm. When your identity is rooted in your performance, people's opinions, or your possessions, it will always be vulnerable. But when it is rooted in your Creator, it becomes invincible. Genesis 1:27 says, "So God created mankind in his own image." That means you were formed in the reflection of greatness. Before you had a job, a relationship, a title, or a reputation, you had identity. And it came from God. That identity doesn't change based on failure, doesn't fade based on age, and doesn't break under pressure. It is eternal, it is spiritual, and it is sealed. But here's the problem. Life tries to rename you. It tries to call you by your experience instead of your essence. It labels you based on your lowest moment instead of your highest calling. Rejected, addict, failure, victim, unworthy, but God never named you that. And the power to stand begins when you reject false labels and reclaim your true name. Do you remember the story of Gideon in Judges 6? When the angel of the Lord appeared to him, Gideon was hiding in fear, yet the angel didn't call him coward. He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon didn't feel like a warrior. His circumstances didn't look victorious, but God wasn't speaking to his condition. He was speaking to his identity. And that identity pulled Gideon out of hiding and into purpose. That's what identity does. It calls you out of what you're in and reminds you of what's in you. Have you ever watched a lion in a zoo? It's behind glass. It's in a cage. People walk by and take pictures. But none of that changes the lion's identity. Even in captivity, it's still a lion. It still carries the nature of a king. Just because it's not in the wild doesn't mean it's not powerful. That's you. You might feel limited. You might be walking through a season that looks like a cage, but your identity hasn't changed. You're still royalty. You're still chosen. You're still equipped. 1 Peter 2:9 says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." That is not just poetic language, it is spiritual truth. And when you internalize that, you begin to walk differently, talk differently, endure differently, because your identity becomes your armor. Let me ask you, who told you you weren't enough? Who convinced you that your past canceled your purpose? Who said you had to earn love, prove your worth, or fight to be seen? That voice didn't come from God. The moment you believe lies about who you are, you start living beneath your calling. You start shrinking in rooms you were born to lead. You start settling in places you were meant to pass through. But when you remember your true identity, you rise. You don't break under pressure because you know pressure can't change your name. You don't crumble in crisis because you understand you're more than what you're facing. You don't lose yourself in the crowd because heaven already knows your name. And even if life has tried to bury your identity under years of pain, disappointment, and false comparisons, God is still calling you by your original design. Not the version people recognize, but the version He created. That's why He keeps pulling you, waking you, shaking you, not to punish you, but to remind you. You are not what you went through, you are who He said you are. And when that truth settles in your spirit, breaking becomes impossible. Because no matter what life tries to strip away, it can never touch what God placed within. That's why no one can break you anymore. You've already survived what was meant to destroy you. Let that sink in. What tried to take you out didn't succeed. What was designed to break you only built something stronger in you. And that means one thing: you're not just a survivor. You are evidence. Evidence that grace works. Evidence that purpose prevails. Evidence that the plan of God is more powerful than the attack of the enemy. So many people carry fear into their future because they've forgotten how far they've already come. They rehearse the pain but neglect the progress. They remember the trauma but forget the triumph. But if you take a moment and look back, not with regret, but with revelation, you'll see the pattern. God kept you through the betrayal, through the bankruptcy, through the depression, through the nights you cried yourself to sleep. You made it. And that alone should shift how you see the rest of your life. Psalm 124, 2-3 says, "If the Lord had not been on our side, the waters would have engulfed us. The torrent would have swept over us." That's not just poetic, it's prophetic. It's the story of every person who has ever been through something that should have taken them out. And yet, you're still here. You didn't drown. You didn't disappear. You're breathing, thinking, growing, becoming. Now, let's be honest. Survival isn't pretty. It's not polished or neat. It's not some cinematic moment with perfect music in the background, no. Survival often looks like crawling when you want to quit, like holding on with shaking hands, like praying with no words, just tears. But even in that fragile state, you endured. You didn't let the pain become permanent. And that says more about your strength than any victory dance ever could. Have you ever noticed how buildings in earthquake zones are built differently? They're constructed with flexibility in mind, not weakness, but resilience. They're designed to bend without breaking. Why? Because the builder knew the shaking was inevitable. Your life was built the same way. God, the master architect, designed you with divine resilience, not so you'd never feel pain, but so you wouldn't be destroyed by it. And when you survive what was meant to kill you, you gain a new kind of authority, not the kind that comes from position, but from perseverance. You can walk into rooms and atmospheres carrying quiet strength. You don't have to explain it. People can feel it because you've been through the fire and you didn't smell like smoke. You've been through the flood and you didn't drown. That's power. Let me ask you, why do you think the enemy fought you so hard? Why do you think the pressure increased the moment you decided to grow, to heal, to move forward? It's because he knew what was in you. He knew that if you ever figured out how strong you really are, he'd lose his leverage. And now, here you are. Not broken, not bitter, but bolder. You're not just alive, you're aware. Aware of your value, aware of your calling, aware of your identity. And that awareness changes everything. You stop entertaining things that drain you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop apologizing for being who God called you to be. Because you know you survived. And if you survive that, there is nothing ahead that you and God can't handle. Even Jesus, after the cross, didn't go back to hiding. He walked into rooms with the marks of survival in his hands. Not ashamed, not quiet, but powerful. He had defeated death, and now he was on a mission. That's your posture now. You didn't just survive to sit in silence, you survived to lead, to speak, to heal, to build, to pour into others what life tried to drain out of you. So the next time fear comes knocking, remind it of your track record, remind it of your scars, remind it that everything that came to break you failed. And because of that, your next chapter is not a question mark, it's a declaration. That's why no one can break you anymore. So now you see, it was never about avoiding the fire, the pressure, the scars, or the shaking. It was about discovering that none of it could destroy you. You've been forged in adversity, refined by truth, anchored by purpose, and sealed by identity. What was meant to break you has only revealed what can never be broken. From this moment forward, walk with a new posture, not of fear, but of faith. Not of shrinking, but of standing tall, because no matter what comes next, you are no longer breakable. You are chosen, called, and completely covered. May you move forward with courage, speak with conviction, and live with the clarity of who you are and why you're here. And when life tries to test you again, just smile, because now you know no one can break you anymore. Thank you for your time, your heart, and your attention. May strength follow you, peace surround you, and purpose guide you. Good luck, and God bless you richly.